So I want you to picture an 11-point scale of human happiness.
Okay, an 11-point scale.
Right, where 0 is just, total misery, and 11 is absolute unfettered bliss.
The absolute peak.
Exactly. Now think about the whole cultural narrative we're fed from childhood, right?
Hmm.
You're told that finding your soulmate, getting married, is gonna just skyrocket your score on that scale.
Oh, yeah. Like it's the ultimate finish line.
Right. So you spend years swiping on apps, stressing over awful dates, fielding those incredibly invasive questions from your relatives at Thanksgiving.
It's just the worst,
It
yeah.
really is. But you do all this because you honestly believe a partner is your ultimate salvation. But the hard data actually tells a completely different story.
A vastly different story.
Yeah. Statistically, getting married only gives people, on average, a 1/10 of 1-point boost on that happiness scale.
Which is, I mean, it is the literal definition of a statistical rounding error when it comes to your lifelong joy.
It's wild. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking a stack of just incredible research from clinical psychologist Dr. Jennifer L. Taitz's book, How to Be Single and Happy.
It's such a necessary book, honestly.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore the science-based strategies that explain why treating a romantic relationship as like a magical cure-all is a massive psychological trap.
Right, and more importantly, we're going to walk through how anyone listening right now can use these evidence-based therapies to hack their own well-being today, completely independently.
Yes, exactly. So to really grasp why we need a totally new strategy for happiness, we first have to examine the actual panic that sets in when we feel like we might end up alone.
Because that panic, it isn't just in your head. It's a real biological phenomenon that physically alters how you function.
Let's get into the mechanics of that because I found the research on the fear of being single to be genuinely unsettling.
Yeah, it's intense. I mean, it fundamentally changes our cognitive abilities. There's this fascinating area of research focused on something called anticipated aloneness.
Anticipated aloneness? Okay.
Right? Researchers basically want to know what happens to the human brain when we simply imagine a future without a partner or a community.
Just the thought of it.
Exactly. So in one major study, a research team brought participants into a lab and gave them a standard IQ test and then followed that up with a personality profile.
Okay. Pretty standard lab stuff so far.
Right. But after the tests, the researchers pulled a specific group aside and handed them some incredibly harsh, completely fake feedback.
Oh, wow. What did they tell them?
They told these individuals that, based on their personality metrics, they were statistically highly likely to end up alone in life.
Oh my gosh. Which is just a brutal thing to hear, even if you know you're in a clinical setting.
Oh, absolutely brutal.
So they implant this terrifying idea of permanent isolation into their heads. Let me guess. When they had those same people take a second IQ test right after hearing that, their scores completely tanked.
They plummeted,
Yep.
yeah. The mere prospect of social exclusion actively impaired their ability to think rationally.
That is wild. Just thinking about being alone makes you worse at taking a test.
Yeah, and the why behind this is rooted deep in our evolutionary biology.
Yeah.
See, 10,000 years ago, being separated from your tribe meant certain death.
Right. Like you couldn't survive the elements or predators by yourself.
Exactly. So when your brain today perceives social exclusion, even just the thought of being permanently single, it triggers that ancient mortal threat response.
So it's literally an ancient survival mechanism kicking in.
It is. Your brain actually shuts down the prefrontal cortex, which is your logic and reasoning center, and reroutes all that energy to the primitive survival centers. You experience a measurable drain in cognitive bandwidth.
Meaning, just worrying that you won't find a partner actually makes you less equipped to handle the daily tests of life.
Yes, precisely.
You are literally operating with less intelligence because your brain thinks there's a saber-toothed tiger waiting outside the cave.
That is a perfect way to put it, and that perfectly sets up a concept developed in behavioral psychology regarding our state of mind.
Right, the two different minds.
Yeah, we constantly oscillate between two states. There's the reasonable mind, which is, grounded and logical. And then there's the emotion mind, where our survival instincts and feelings take the wheel.
And when that evolutionary panic sets in, we basically get trapped in the emotion mind.
Right, exactly. And that's when we fall victim to emotional reasoning.
Man, emotional reasoning is such a dangerous trap for anyone who is dating.
Oh, it's so common.
That's when you catch yourself thinking like, I've been single for a year, therefore I am fundamentally unlovable and I will die alone.
Right. Your brain takes a temporary feeling and presents it to you as an undeniable concrete fact.
And when you feel that terrible fact closing in on you, you desperately look for an escape hatch.
Yeah, you do. And for a lot of people, that escape hatch is marriage. Which brings us to a really well-documented phenomenon in psychology known as the hedonic treadmill.
Okay, break that down for us.
So it basically dictates that human beings have a set baseline level of happiness. Extreme events, whether it's winning the lottery or suffering a tragedy, they temporarily spike or drop our happiness.
Right, but then we get used to it.
Exactly. We eventually adapt and revert right back to our baseline. Dr. Taitz applies this directly to dating in the book. She calls it the husband treadmill or the partner treadmill.
The husband treadmill. You know, that sounds exactly like a fad diet.
Oh, that's a great comparison. How so?
Well, you convince yourself that if you just hit this one magic number on the scale, your entire life will be permanently fixed. Like you'll never be sad again, your daily stress will just vanish.
Right, you think the external metric changes the internal reality.
Yeah. But you are completely ignoring the fact that your underlying baseline, your actual daily habits, your coping mechanisms, your mindset, all of that remains totally unchanged.
The data supports that analogy beautifully, actually. Researchers have long studied the equation for human happiness, breaking it down into genetics, daily deliberate activities, and life circumstances.
And marriage is a life circumstance.
Exactly. The husband treadmill assumes that altering your circumstance, getting a spouse, will permanently rewrite the whole equation.
Yeah.
But there was this massive 15-year longitudinal study that tracked 24,000 individuals, and it proved otherwise.
Which brings us right back to that wild 1/10 of 1 point statistic from the beginning.
Yes, it does. The study revealed that marriage only provides a tiny, fleeting 1% boost to a person's happiness.
Just 1%.
Yeah, and once the honeymoon phase fades, individuals revert right back to their pre-marriage baseline. In fact, the data showed just as many people ended up less happy after marriage as those who reported being more content.
So, wait, if the data is this definitive, why do we still cling to the cultural narrative of the soulmate? I mean, why is our society so aggressively structured around the belief that finding a person is the finish line?
Well, it comes down to a cognitive blind spot called effective forecasting.
And effective forecasting.
Right. We are notoriously terrible at predicting our own future emotional states.
We think we know how we'll feel, but we don't.
Exactly. In a classic study at Harvard, researchers interviewed college students who had just endured a really painful breakup. They asked the students to predict how they would feel 2 months down the line.
And naturally, the students predicted absolute enduring misery, right?
Of course they did.
Yeah.
Yet when researchers checked in 2 months later, those same students had happiness levels identical to their peers who were happily partnered.
Wow. We dramatically underestimate our own resilience.
We really do. When we forecast the future, we focus entirely on the isolated event, like the breakup or the wedding, and we completely forget about all the mundane realities of daily life that actually dictate our mood.
Like getting stuck in traffic or, having a really great cup of coffee.
Exactly. We think a breakup will destroy us forever, and we think a marriage will elate us forever, and we are wrong on both counts.
Okay, so if we accept that coupling up doesn't permanently elevate our happiness baseline, we have to pivot here.
Right, we have to look elsewhere.
Because for you listening, if you are feeling miserable while navigating single life, the culprit isn't your lack of a ring. It is the mental traps you are falling into that are actively dragging your baseline down.
Managing our minds is where the real work happens. And the most destructive mental trap of all is rumination.
Ugh, rumination, the endless, looping highlight reel of everything going wrong.
It's the worst. Rumination is basically the act of obsessively chewing on negative thoughts, past mistakes, or perceived flaws.
We tend to think of it as just a harmless bad habit, don't we?
We do, but the psychological impact is profound. We actually learned just how toxic it is through a bizarre coincidence during the 1989 San Francisco earthquake.
Oh, I love this part. This is one of those studies where the setup is almost as fascinating as the result itself.
It truly is. So, a prominent psychology professor had just administered a really detailed questionnaire to a couple hundred university students, and she was specifically measuring their daily tendencies to overthink and ruminate. A few days later, the massive Loma Prieta earthquake struck the Bay Area. So suddenly, she had this incredible, unintended before and after data set.
Wow, talk about timing.
Right. In the weeks and months following the disaster, she tracked down those exact same students to assess their psychological state.
Okay, let me guess. The ones who already had a habit of obsessing over their problems fared Much worse.
Significantly worse. The students who demonstrated a high tendency to ruminate before the quake were highly likely to develop PTSD and severe depression afterward.
That makes sense, but it's still alarming.
But here's the crucial detail. This was true even for students who were not directly affected by the earthquake.
Wait, really?
Yeah, people who suffered no property loss, no physical injury. The mental habit of rumination alone turned the ambient stress of the event into lasting psychological trauma.
The mental habit was a stronger predictor of trauma than the physical reality of the earthquake. That is just staggering.
It's a huge wake-up call about how we process stress.
And it brings up a huge friction point, I think. Because culturally, we are taught the exact opposite of this.
Oh, for sure.
We are taught the myth of venting. You know, if you have a horrible first date or a tough breakup, the standard advice is to call your friends, pour some wine, and hash out every single detail so you can, quote, get it out of your system.
Right. But the clinical science shows that getting it out often morphs into co-rumination.
Co-rumination.
Yeah. When you endlessly rehash negative details with your social circle, you aren't releasing the emotion. You are actually carving the neural groove of that pain deeper into your brain.
So you're just reinforcing the trauma over and over.
Exactly. Furthermore, chronic co-rumination actively exhausts your support system over time.
Oh, because it burns out the people around you.
Yep. Which ultimately leaves you feeling even more isolated.
Wow. So rumination traps us in the present. But the book also highlights how we trap ourselves in the past through regret.
Yes, regret is a massive trap.
Yeah. There's this incredibly vivid case study in the book about a woman named Casey. She breaks up with her high school boyfriend because, you know, he wants to be a musician and she wants a stable, predictable life.
Which is a very common scenario.
Very common. But fast forward a decade, and that ex-boyfriend is literally a famous rock star opening for massive arena tours.
Right. And Casey falls into a profound state of counterfactual thinking.
Counterfactual thinking? What does she do?
She basically begins torturing herself by vividly imagining an alternate perfect reality where she stayed with him. In her mind, she's living this glamorous, wealthy, blissfully happy life on a tour bus rather than facing her actual reality.
And while she is constructing this elaborate fantasy, she is sitting in a freezing cubicle at a temp job, constantly refreshing his social media.
Yeah, she's completely stuck.
She is completely unable to focus on improving her actual circumstances because her brain is using all its processing power to render a reality that doesn't exist. It's a total drain of cognitive bandwidth.
Exactly. Regret is essentially rumination, heavily laced with self-blame, and it just paralyzes you. But we have to be careful here, because trying to escape these feelings leads to a third trap on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Which is experiential avoidance.
Right, experiential avoidance.
This is the instinct to just run away from the bad feelings entirely. Just stuff them down and pretend everything is fine.
Yeah, it is the unhealthy effort to escape or suppress unpleasant thoughts. We convince ourselves that if we just ignore the sadness or the loneliness, it will disappear.
But it doesn't, does it?
No, it makes it worse. A landmark study out of Stanford actually tested the biological cost of this suppression.
Oh, the movie study.
Yes. Researchers had women watch various movie clips that were deeply sad, funny, or scary. One group was instructed to express their emotions naturally, while another group was ordered to actively suppress any reaction and maintain a completely blank face.
I'm deducing a pattern here with these studies. The people suppressing their emotions actually felt worse, didn't they?
They felt worse, and their bodies paid a steep price. The suppressors experienced significantly less joy during the funny clips, and during the distressing clips, their cardiovascular systems showed extreme physiological stress.
Just from trying to hide what they were feeling.
Exactly. Their heart rates and blood pressure spiked purely from the muscular and mental effort of hiding their feelings.
That's exhausting.
And to make matters worse, related research shows that when you suppress your emotions in social settings, micro-expressions leak out. People unconsciously pick up on that tension, which actually makes you appear less likable and less agreeable.
So it completely hinders authentic human connection.
Exactly. It backfires entirely.
Okay, wait, hold on. This feels like a massive catch-22 for anyone listening right now.
How so?
Well, if calling my friends to vent makes things worse because it carves negative neural pathways, but stuffing my feelings down spikes my blood pressure and makes me unlikable, what is the secret third option here?
Right. You feel trapped.
Yeah. Am I just supposed to sit alone in my room and stare at the bad feeling?
That is the pivotal question, honestly. The answer is you don't suppress the feeling and you don't obsess over it. You deploy the antidote.
And what's the antidote?
You change your relationship to the present moment through mindfulness and intentional mindset shifts.
Okay, so by mindfulness, you mean simply being present.
Yeah, presence is the very foundation of well-being. There was a massive study run out of Harvard that utilized a custom smartphone app to ping thousands of people at random intervals throughout their day.
Just checking in on them.
Right. The app asked 3 simple questions. How are you feeling? What are you doing right now? And is your mind wandering?
And what did they find?
The data revealed a stark reality. People reported being significantly less happy whenever their minds were wandering away from the present moment.
But wait, what if they were mind-wandering about something wonderful, like daydreaming about an upcoming vacation while doing the dishes?
Even then, they were less happy than people who were simply focused on the mundane task in front of them.
Really? Even if the daydream was positive?
Yeah. The profound conclusion of the study is that happiness demands presence. So when you are single and constantly daydreaming about some future partner who is finally going to validate your life, you are actively draining the joy out of the life you're living today.
I hear that, I really do. But telling someone who is incredibly lonely to just be mindful can sound a bit like a cheap bumper sticker.
It can sound very dismissive, yeah.
How does a person actually build that presence in a real way?
Well, it sounds simple, but the neuroscience backing it up is incredibly robust. Brain imaging studies have shown that just 8 weeks of consistent mindfulness training physically alters the brain's architecture.
It actually changes the brain.
It does. It thickens the prefrontal cortex and shrinks the amygdala, literally changing the neural correlates associated with managing stress.
So you aren't just adopting a new attitude, you are actually reshaping your brain's hardware to process negative feelings more efficiently.
Precisely. You're building a new capacity.
So it's a bit like this. Imagine you're sitting on a long flight, and the person in the seat directly in front of you is watching a truly terrible, anxiety-inducing movie on their screen.
Okay, I can picture that.
You can't reach over and turn their screen off, right? That movie is your negative emotion. Suppressing the emotion is like squeezing your eyes shut and plugging your ears for 6 hours. It's exhausting and it spikes your blood pressure.
Right, that's avoidance.
And ruminating is plugging your own headphones into their armrest and analyzing every horrible frame of the film.
Yes.
But mindfulness is simply acknowledging, yep, there's a terrible movie playing right there. But choosing to open your own book and read instead, you allow the movie to exist in your periphery, but you don't let it hijack your flight.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. I love that. Mindfulness is observation without entanglement.
Observation without entanglement.
Exactly. And when you pair that physical presence with a deliberate mindset shift, the biological results are staggering. There was a famous study involving hotel maids that perfectly illustrates the biology of belief.
Oh, I've heard of this one.
Yeah, researchers looked at over 80 female room attendants. These women were on their feet all day, doing incredibly strenuous physical labor, pushing heavy carts, lifting mattresses, scrubbing floors.
But despite all that physical exertion, because their mindset was that this was draining work and not exercise, their bodies didn't reap the benefits, right?
Right. They actually had the blood pressure and body fat percentages of sedentary office workers.
Which seems so unfair given how hard they were working.
It really does. So the researchers implemented a simple intervention. They split the maids into 2 groups. For the experimental group, they presented data showing that the daily tasks they were already doing actually met and exceeded the Surgeon General's requirements for a highly active, healthy lifestyle.
So they didn't change a single behavior or add any new workouts.
Not a single one. They only changed the psychological framework.
And the belief alone triggered a biological response.
It did. 4 weeks later, the women who believed their work was healthy exercise saw their blood pressure drop, they lost weight, and their body fat decreased.
That is unbelievable. And the control group.
The control group, doing the exact same physical labor but without the mindset shift, experienced 0 biological changes. The brain altered its physiological response based entirely on expectation.
Wow. So applying this directly to someone navigating the dating world, if you hold the belief that being single is a tragic waiting room where you are just killing time until your real life begins, your brain and your biology will experience it as a tragedy.
Yes.
But if you reframe it, if you adopt the mindset that this is a period of vital autonomy, a time to cultivate your character and deepen your friendships, your actual biological experience of your life will fundamentally improve.
Which brings us to the most actionable part of the equation.
Oh, okay, let's hear it.
Once you utilize mindfulness to stop fighting your current reality, How do you actively design a life that feels deeply fulfilling today? How do you stop waiting?
Right. How do we get off the bench and actually take action?
By swapping out outcome-based goals for process-based values.
Goals versus values.
Yeah. Culturally, we are obsessed with the getting the promotion, getting the spouse, getting the house.
Always the next thing.
Right. The problem is that goals are binary. You either achieve them or you fail. And if you fail, your self-worth plummets. Values, however, are ongoing processes. They are about how you behave, not what you acquire.
You know, this sounds a lot like the distinction between resume virtues and eulogy virtues.
Yes, exactly like David Brix's concept.
Resume virtues are your outcome goals, right? Your job title, your marital status, what you achieved. But eulogy virtues are your process values, who you were at your core. Like, were you compassionate? Were you brave? Were you curious?
It is a perfect parallel.
Yeah.
You cannot control whether you achieve the goal of finding a spouse next week.
Yeah.
But you have absolute control over whether you live by the value of being an open, loving person today.
And that's empowering.
It is. And prioritizing those internal values and your own autonomy is literally life-extending. A classic 1970s study in a nursing home proved this.
In a nursing home.
Yeah. Researchers gave one group of elderly residents a sense of total autonomy. They could choose their daily schedules, pick their meals, and they were each given a houseplant that they were solely responsible for keeping alive.
Okay, that sounds nice. And the control group.
The control group had everything done for them. With the best of intentions, of course. The staff managed their schedules, delivered their meals, and watered their plants.
Let me guess, the autonomy group fared better.
Much better. Within just a few weeks, the group with autonomy, the group that had a say in their lives and a small responsibility tied to the value of nurturing something, were measurably happier, more active, and statistically lived longer.
Wow.
Yeah. Stripping away someone's autonomy and daily purpose actually diminishes their life force.
So if autonomy and values are literally life-giving, how does a single person inject this into, say, a lonely Tuesday night?
Through a clinical practice called behavioral activation, or BA.
Behavioral activation.
Right. While it sounds highly academic, the application is deeply practical. A major study out of the University of Washington compared behavioral activation to standard antidepressant medication for treating severe depression.
Okay, that's a big comparison.
It is, and the results show that BA was just as effective as the medication.
Wait, let's unpack the mechanics of that. Just changing how you schedule your day treated clinical depression as effectively as altering brain chemistry with a pill. How does that actually work?
Well, it operates on a dopamine feedback loop. BA is the practice of structuring your day with activities that are directly linked to your long-term values, regardless of how you feel in the present moment.
Ah, so you don't wait for motivation.
Exactly. The core principle is that action precedes motivation. You don't wait until you feel like it to do something good for yourself.
Because if you're depressed, you're never going to feel like it.
Exactly. You deliberately schedule moments of mastery and moments of pleasure, which forces your brain to generate dopamine, breaking the depressive cycle.
This is where the case study of Maggie from the book really shines, I think. Her story is so visceral.
Oh, Maggie's story is fantastic.
Yeah. So she moves across the country to Los Angeles for this big TV job, but almost immediately the show gets canceled.
A nightmare scenario.
Right. And she's locked into a year-long lease, dealing with chronic physical back pain, and she is entirely isolated. She's single, feeling invisible on dating apps, and just thoroughly defeated.
She is in the perfect storm for severe depression and experiential avoidance. Her instinct is just to melt into her couch and hide.
But she utilizes behavioral activation. She stops waiting to feel motivated. She identifies her core values. She values her physical health. And she values a sense of fun.
Right. She goes back to the values.
Yeah. So even though she feels miserable, she schedules a Pilates class to address her back pain. That's her mastery. And then, for pure pleasure, she finds a local dive bar hosting an 80s arcade night.
Which is so brave when you're feeling that low.
It is. She goes completely alone, plays Pac-Man, and dances by herself to Madonna. She structured her environment to force an engagement with her values, and it literally jump-started her joy.
That forced engagement is the secret.
Oh.
And it completely flips the script on dating, too.
How so?
Well, instead of treating dating as a getting exercise, where you are trying to extract validation or secure a partner, you treat it as a giving exercise. You use dates as a laboratory to practice your values.
Let me challenge that for a second, putting myself in the shoes of a listener.
So go for it.
If I focus entirely on my own internal eulogy virtues, if I'm totally at peace playing Pac-Man by myself and being a good friend, isn't there a huge risk of complacency?
Complacency.
Yeah, like won't I just stop trying to improve my circumstances or meet someone entirely because I'm so fine on my own?
It is a totally valid fear, but the psychology shows the reality is the exact opposite. Living by your values actually drives more action than fixating on goals. Yeah, consider this. When your singular goal is to get a husband, every bad date feels like a crushing personal failure. That fear of failure makes you want to delete the apps and quit dating altogether,
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
right?
Right.
But when your stated value is to be an open, curious person, a bad date isn't a failure at all. It is simply an opportunity to practice curiosity.
Because you are no longer paralyzed by the terror of a bad outcome.
Exactly. You actually take more risks and put yourself out there more consistently.
That makes total sense. You remove the crushing pressure of the outcome, which allows you to actually be present and enjoy the process.
And it changes who you look for, too. The book recommends creating a values pie chart to identify what truly matters to you in a partner, moving past superficial traits like height or income.
So you look for deeper things.
Right. You start looking for someone who prioritizes those eulogy virtues. Specifically, you look for agreeableness and kindness.
Which aligns perfectly with Dr. John Gottman's legendary relationship research.
Absolutely. Gottman is the gold standard in this field. He can observe a couple interacting for just a few minutes and predict whether they will divorce with over 90% accuracy.
Over 90%? That's insane.
It is. And the number one predictor of a relationship's demise: contempt.
Contempt.
Wow. It's behaving with superiority, eye-rolling, or subtle cruelty. If you are seeking a partner, you must prioritize the internal value of kindness over the external goal of a glamorous lifestyle, because contempt will erode and destroy that lifestyle every single time.
Okay, let's step back and synthesize everything we've uncovered in this deep dive. For you listening, if you take nothing else away, let it be this. Happiness is not a geographical destination.
It's really not.
And it is certainly not a finish line you cross when you say, I do. It is a muscle. And it is a muscle you have to build right now, today.
Every single day?
You build it by recognizing the evolutionary panic of being alone and refusing to succumb to it. You build it by dodging the mental traps of endless rumination and regret.
Right. Avoiding that co-rumination.
Exactly. You build it by using mindfulness to stay anchored in the present, rather than suppressing your reality. And you build it by filling your days with behavioral activation, taking actions that align with your deepest, most authentic eulogy virtues, regardless of how motivated you feel.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating and perhaps a bit provocative final thought to ponder.
Ooh, I like provocative.
Well, we've just explored the hard clinical data, proving that behavioral activation and values-based living can literally rewire the architecture of our brains and treat severe depression just as effectively as medication.
Yeah, the impact is undeniable.
So if prioritizing our internal values is the true biological key to well-being, what does this mean for how our society structures the entire concept of adulthood?
Oh, that's a great point.
Right now, we construct our entire social calendar and our communal validation around outcome goals and relationship milestones.
Oh, that is so true. Think about the sheer amount of time, energy, and money we spend. We throw these massive, elaborate parties, engagement parties, bridal showers, baby showers. We gather our entire communities to celebrate people checking off these societal outcome-based boxes. But what if we completely upended that script?
What would that look like?
Well, what if instead of exclusively celebrating the getting, we started celebrating the becoming?
I love that. What if we threw values showers?
Yes. Values showers. Imagine receiving an invitation in the mail to celebrate a friend who is taking a massive, courageous step toward their eulogy virtues.
That would be amazing.
Right. You rent out a room at a restaurant for a friend who finally found the bravery to walk away from a toxic, soul-crushing job. Or you put together a gift registry for a friend who is moving to a brand new city entirely alone to start over and practice autonomy.
I'd absolutely go to those parties.
Or we just throw a massive bash to celebrate someone who has mastered the profound art of being deeply, independently happy on their own. We need to start validating the process, not just the finish line. Because, as the science has shown us today, that finish line is mostly a mirage, a statistical rounding error. The real joy, the real substance of your life is in the run itself.